Hi, welcome to this short video. I'm delighted to be joined by corporate resilience trainer, wellbeing expert and WorkLife central favourite, if I'm allowed to say that, Pinky Jangra, for today's conversation around the hot topic of people pleasing. Really great to have you here with me today, Pinky. Before we start, would you like to give us a little bit of your background?
Sure, yes. So I have about 17 years of experience and counting in the world of human development. I'm basically obsessed with everything to do with humans and life and why we're here and how we overcome challenges and how we flourish and live our best lives at home and at work. I also have about 10 years of experience in the corporate world. And why I'm really looking forward to this conversation is because I am very much a recovering people pleaser. Absolutely.
So where have you experienced people pleasing then, Pinky?
Everywhere in my whole life, pretty much, to be honest. So one of the key things that comes to my mind is in the corporate workplace. So I used to be a management consultant, very difficult industry to work in, a lot of demands, a lot of projects, lots of client requests, lots of things you've got to juggle. And I would often just find myself saying yes to everything, taking on so much, to the point where I would exhaust myself, which is not healthy. And that's one of the problems that comes with people pleasing that I'm sure we're going to talk about today. And then there's other little things, you know, like when friends invite you out and you don't really want to go, but you feel like you have to say yes and you end up going along.
I think we all do that. But do you ever find, because sometimes I do that, and in actual fact, once I arrive, I do have a good time and I am glad I went. So how do you know the difference for you, Pinky, as to whether you should or shouldn't have gone?
Yeah, and I think that's a learning curve as well, right? You just test it out, try things out, and it's never one way all the time. But one of the things about people pleasing that I try and remind myself of is, if you're saying yes to someone else, are you also saying no to yourself? So if there's a part of me that wants to stay home, have a rest, be in my pajamas, drink a cup of tea, and I say no to that part of me in order to please the group to go out, then that to me is not so helpful. So if I'm just feeling a little bit, oh, I don't really feel like going, but I'll go, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
And like you say, you can end up having a great time. But if you really feel like there's a big part of you that's saying no and you're avoiding that, then that's when I pay attention and realize that I might be in people-pleasing mode.
Yeah, I suppose it's about, there's an aspect of guilt as well, isn't there? Whether you feel guilty for letting people down, or sometimes if I don't go, I sometimes feel guilty as if I might have let myself down because there'd been an opportunity there and I hadn't taken it. And I think that's the thing with life. You're presented with so many opportunities and there's a real feeling that you should take them all.
Yeah, absolutely. So you remind me of one of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite people, Gabor Maté. We've spoken about him. He's in all my trainings, quoting him everywhere. And he says, if you have to choose guilt over resentment, choose guilt. So guilt is that initial, oh, I've said no and I feel guilty about it. But that will eventually pass, for me, often quite quickly. It depends what the topic is. But resentment is what festers in the long term when you keep saying yes, you keep saying yes, you keep saying no to yourself, you keep putting everyone else first. And that's really unhealthy mentally and physically. So yes, guilt is going to happen. It's going to happen. But if you realize you can just hang with that guilt for a little while, it's much better than festering in the resentment if you just keep saying yes.
I completely understand. Resentment is really damaging, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
The reason I wanted to have the conversation today is that it's come up a lot. It's a really big topic at the moment, people pleasing. And as I've spoken to various wellbeing experts, you know, I've asked their perspectives and I really wanted to try and unpick a few of those. Now, I'm just going to share them with you, a few of the key things that have come out, and it would be great to get your perspective. Firstly, some people say that people pleasing can be positive. You know, it gets things done amiably, quickly. It's a really easy way to move forward. Secondly, that it's really toxic and you must always protect yourself and serve your needs first. So complete different opposite ends of the scale. And then there was a third point that somebody mentioned to me, which I hadn't considered previously, which is that by people pleasing, you're putting pressure on the person you're pleasing to please you. Now, I know there's a lot there, Pinky, but would you like to share a few of your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the first one that you mentioned, which is around it gets stuff done, to me, the energy of that doesn't feel like people pleasing. It's just functional behavior. Is that we live in groups, we work in groups. Sometimes you just got to do a few things to get a better outcome overall for everybody. So I don't think that's people pleasing. This is a problem. We've got to understand what we're actually talking about here.
How would you define people pleasing?
Yeah, so I haven't Googled it, but I'd love to Google it and see what comes up. But actually, something that came to me just recently when I was thinking about this is similar to what we just said earlier, but in other words, which is people pleasing is when you're making everybody else happy at the detriment to yourself.
Right.
So that's when we talk about it being toxic, because you are suffering through the people pleasing. And that is something that you want to look at because it's not healthy for you. So I don't think it's black and white. You know, it's every scenario is different. Every person is different. But it's about you becoming aware in your own energy about, you know, is this a detriment to myself? Because that's when I think it goes into that border of people pleasing and toxicity that's unhealthy. I really like what you were saying about at the end there, what I call the one-way bargain. So you give something to someone else and now they feel like they have to give something back to you. And my intuitive sense around that is that, let's say you give something to me and I feel have to give something back. I think that's coming from my people-pleasing tendencies as well.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that does.
Yeah.
So it's people-pleasing people pleasers.
Is to tango, right?
Yeah.
Because I have had situations as I grow on my journey of not doing this anymore as much. I have had situations where someone gives something to me and I just receive it with grace, with gratitude. And I'm like, cool, that's it. But then in the past, it was more of an entanglement of, oh, they've done something. And that was the people's pleasing side of me. Oh, now I've got to please you back. So I think it takes two in that scenario. So I don't think everyone will experience that. But if you are a people pleaser, then
I think it's quite common. You know, as a parent, I have situations whereby, you know, people ask me to have their children and it's not always convenient, but I know it's better for them because they've got a big work thing and I could, but it's going to make my life more complicated. So I think, yes, I'll do that. And the detriment to me is small. And then they come back and say, oh, well, I'll have your daughter on Thursday. I'm thinking, but I don't need you to have my daughter on Thursday. Just because I had yours doesn't mean you have to have mine. So there are all sorts of places where this happens. So we know a good definition of being a people pleaser is where it causes detriment to yourself to please others. So that's a good place to start and something to look at, would you say?
Absolutely. And for me, it's all about energy and sensing. Again, it's not what you do, it's where you're coming from. Because I can please someone, do something from a place of love and service and giving, and I don't need anything back. That's a wonderful place to please others. But if I'm coming from fear, if I don't please you, you might reject me, you might punish me, you might not love me, you might not like me, you might not validate me anymore. That's people pleasing. So it's really about reflecting as well, where am I coming from? And you've got to get self-aware about that because it will be different in every scenario. But it's really the two choices. Am I pleasing you from fear and needing something back, or am I pleasing you from love and service because I want to give? So two different energies, two different results.
Absolutely. As you say, you know, our root desire is to avoid stress and avoid hurting others' feelings. So when you're in that situation, how can you sensitively push back? You know, what would you say to somebody if they did something that wasn't something that you wanted to do?
So I think one of the things that I've been learning to do that's really helpful is to pause and take space for myself first.
Yeah.
Because in the past, because I've been people pleasing for nearly 40 years, it's a habit. So it just comes out of my mouth. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
So firstly is take some space and come back. And you know, you don't have to answer straight away. Say, let me just think about that, I'll get back to you. So first give yourself some space to calm down, and then see what's really true. Do I want to say yes, or do I want to say no? And then that gives you more of a space to think about how you're going to articulate it as well. And you know, it could be things like saying, well, I can't do this right now, but maybe we do this instead, or you know, maybe I know someone else who can help you. So it's not necessarily just a straight no. But also doing it with the little things and doing it quickly. Because if someone's asking, especially if it's someone who's in your life all the time, if you've always said yes, and you're festering that inside, that's when it can sometimes blow up. When you finally say no, and you say, right, and then you upset people and you hurt feelings and so on. So the more you can start doing it little by little, the less you're going to blow up and end up saying it in a hurtful way or upsetting someone. So the little baby steps, taking space, don't answer straight away, give yourself space to really think about what you're going to say. And then, you know, you can offer alternatives as well. So they don't feel like you've just closed the door in their face completely, you know, and it's a win-win. You're thinking about how can we help each other as well, you know, not just me giving to you. But the last thing I will say on that, we also have to understand that we cannot control and are not responsible for how other people feel.
Very true. You know? It is difficult though, isn't it? And we all have the friend or the colleague we tread more sensitively around, don't we? It's interesting. I think it can be handled sensitive. You know, if you're the sort of person who gets invited to a big party and they're not something that you enjoy, but you go under duress, you could say to that person, instead of coming to this big party for your birthday, perhaps I could take you for a drink or for a coffee, or we could go for a walk, or, you know, something that fits more with you know, what makes you feel comfortable. And perhaps making people aware about where you do or don't feel comfortable, so they know for future, so you're not hurting somebody's feelings. They just know that actually that's not something you enjoy. Or with a partner, you know, if you're clear from the outset that a particular behavior or a particular you know, action doesn't work for you, or a particular way of doing things, then hopefully that should prevent there being a bigger issue in the future.
Yes, and knowing that you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to know what's right for you and ask for your needs to be met, or at least assert your own needs and preferences. You are allowed to do it. And the problem with people pleasing is that we will have learned in our childhood to people please. This is not an adult thing. It's something we learn in our youngest years, to please people, to get love, validation, acceptance. In my case, avoid punishment. I grew up in a very strict environment, Indian environment. You do as you're told. You don't argue. You don't have opinions. And so it's just yes to whatever is said around me or done around me. And so we learn it, and then we just carry on the habit into our adult lives. But when you're an adult, if you start working on this and start setting your healthy boundaries and saying no's, what I have also realized is that in the adult world, most people can actually be okay with that. So your little child brain is saying, no, you can't do it. But then in the adult world, you do it, and people say, oh, of course, that's fine. Don't worry if you can't come to this. You know, they're a lot more accepting than you might think, but you don't know that until you start doing it and trying.
And I presume we're into, it's again, how you push back. So, you know, I think we've talked about in other WorkLife Central videos and events, I statements rather than you statements. So you're not making somebody else feel bad, or saying to a colleague, yes, I can do that by Tuesday, to give yourself more time. So again, you can have a very constructive, positive conversation whilst not feeling under pressure and causing that resentment for yourself.
Exactly. And that's functional behaviors. The quick yeses and the yes, take everything on and not think about it. That's the dysfunctional behavior that we're looking at. But exactly what you said is how we do it functionally, because you do have elements of control. that you can set the timelines and deadlines, you can talk about it, negotiate it a little bit, or if it comes down to it, you can just say no. You know, in some scenarios that may be the best thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
it's
hard.
learning how to, it is, but it takes practice, you know, like I've been doing this for many years and I'm still working on it and I still fall into the trap. But for me, as with everything, it's baby steps, little things. Anytime you can catch yourself, okay, try it in this moment, take a break, think about it, articulate your no in the best way, you know, and once you do it, where the body goes, the mind follows. So move yourself into the action, even if you're scared, even if you're guilty, because those are not going to go away. But you can do the right behavior, which is going to get the best outcome for you. And the more you do it, you'll start to train your brain. Oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
Actually, people don't hate me if I do it. Some of them are very supportive of me asserting my boundaries and saying no, you know, and no one punished me and people still like me. And, you know, so you start to retrain your brain by taking the action, which gives you new information and experiences because you've started doing something different. And now that starts to reprogram your subconscious, and it will become a habit if you just keep doing it, and you'll find it so much easier after time. So.
Oh, thank you, Pinky. That's such a positive, practical way of looking at it. And I think probably that's a good place to wrap up and summarize. What I've taken from today is that people pleasing is when it causes detriment to yourself, and that you can say no. You can say no in a positive way, and to take baby steps and to take some space and to think about whether you're going to say yes to something or not, rather than have this knee-jerk yes reaction that I think lots of us do have. Is there anything you'd add to that at this stage?
No, I think that's a perfect summation of how to approach it, and the key takeaways definitely. I think, you know, the last thing I would say, a couple of things really, is that number one, be compassionate with yourself. You're not broken. You haven't done anything wrong. You just learned a pattern in childhood, which was valid then because it kept you safe. It kept you loved. It was good. But it's just a pattern, and many of us have it. And now you're learning a new way of being. You're changing yourself. You're transforming. So be compassionate and kind with yourself as you do that. And also then, similar to that is also understanding we're not alone, because that's why I like talking to you about it, is many of us are experiencing this. So just realizing you're not alone, I think, is also really, really helpful.
Brilliant. We'll wrap up there for today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you as ever, Pinky, and I'm sure we'll speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Cheers, Fran.
Thank you.